The front door opened just as the last golden rays of the afternoon sun stretched across the living room floor, and in that single moment, something inside me quietly broke. My wife walked in nearly 3 hours later than she promised, wearing an expression that wasn't tired or apologetic. It was a smug little smile, as though she had already decided my feelings didn't matter anymore. Then came the words that echoed through every corner of our home. She told me I should be grateful she had even bothered to come home. Those few words didn't sound like anger. They sounded like complete indifference, and somehow that hurt even more. I looked around at the family photographs hanging on the wall, remembering the people we used to be, and realized that sometimes the loudest heartbreak arrives without shouting. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is never weakness and that everyone deserves a second chance when it's truly earned, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Stories for more emotional journeys that stay with you long after they end. My name is Adrian Mercer, and until that afternoon I had spent 12 years believing that love meant enduring every storm without complaint. I believed patience could heal distance, sacrifice could fix loneliness, and silence could protect a marriage from falling apart. I was wrong about more things than I cared to admit. Every morning I woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, packed lunches, watered the flowers my wife once loved, and left encouraging notes she rarely acknowledged. I convinced myself that one more kind gesture would remind her of the man she married. Instead, those gestures slowly became invisible, like wallpaper no one notices until it begins to peel away. My wife, Serena, had not always been cold. Years earlier she laughed so freely that strangers smiled simply because they heard her happiness. We built our first tiny apartment with second-hand furniture and impossible dreams. We counted coins before grocery shopping, celebrated every promotion with homemade dinners, and promised each other that success would never matter more than love. Somewhere between promotions, social circles, expensive dinners, and endless work events, those promises quietly disappeared. She became someone always chasing the next exciting moment, while I remained the man trying to protect the ordinary moments that truly built a family. That afternoon, after hearing her dismissive words, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply thanked her for finally making something clear. The confusion that had haunted me for years suddenly disappeared. I realized I had mistaken endurance for love. They were not the same thing. Endurance without respect slowly destroys the soul. The following morning, I did something I had not done in years. I made breakfast for one. There was no coffee waiting on the other side of the table, no carefully folded napkin beside her plate, no reminder text asking if she had eaten lunch. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was simply refusing to keep pouring from a cup that had already become empty. At first Serena hardly noticed. She hurried through the house as she always did, assuming everything would somehow take care of itself. But over the next several days, little changes began appearing everywhere. Her dry cleaning wasn't magically picked up. Her favorite snacks didn't refill themselves. Bills requiring both our attention sat untouched until she realized someone had always been quietly managing them. The peaceful home she enjoyed wasn't effortless. It had been built every day by someone she no longer appreciated. Meanwhile, I focused on something unfamiliar, myself. During lunch breaks I walked through a nearby park instead of rushing to finish errands. I started reading books I had postponed for years. I joined a community woodworking class where retired craftsmen patiently taught younger people how to transform rough pieces of wood into something beautiful. Each unfinished table reminded me that damaged things weren't worthless. They simply needed patient hands willing to reshape them. One afternoon an elderly instructor named Walter noticed my silence. Without asking personal questions, he simply told me that wood always reveals where pressure has been applied. The strongest pieces often carry the deepest scars. His words stayed with me because they described people just as accurately. Weeks passed, and something unexpected happened. Friends who had slowly disappeared from my life began inviting me out again. They told me I smiled differently now. Not because I was happier, but because I finally looked lighter. I had spent years carrying emotional weight that was never mine alone. Back at home, Serena's confidence slowly began cracking. The house felt different. Not hostile. Just quiet. The comfortable certainty that I would always absorb every disappointment had disappeared. For the first time in years, she began asking where I had been, what I was doing, and why I seemed so calm. I answered honestly but briefly. My peace no longer depended on convincing someone to value me. One rainy Saturday afternoon, while organizing old boxes in the attic, I found our wedding album. Dust covered the edges, but the photographs still held the brightness we once shared. I sat on the wooden floor turning each page slowly. There we were laughing beneath strings of white lights, dancing without music because the electricity had briefly failed, smiling as though nothing in the world could separate us. Tears filled my eyes, not because I wanted those days back exactly as they were, but because I mourned the people we had once promised never to become. Later that evening Serena quietly found the album lying open beside me. For several long minutes neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with memories both beautiful and painful. I noticed her expression changing as each photograph reminded her of forgotten promises. For the first time in years, I saw regret instead of pride. Life, however, has a way of testing whether change is genuine. A few days later my mother suffered a minor medical emergency. Thankfully she recovered, but those anxious hours at the hospital reminded me how fragile time really is. Family members gathered together, comforting one another without keeping score of who had done more or sacrificed more. Watching them, I realized healthy love never competes. It quietly serves. Serena arrived at the hospital later that evening carrying flowers for my mother. She looked exhausted, not from work but from something happening inside her heart. She watched my sisters thanking nurses, my nephews hugging grandparents, and she seemed to recognize everything she had slowly drifted away from while chasing a lifestyle that never truly satisfied her. On the drive home she stared silently through the window while golden sunlight returned after the rain. The city looked peaceful, almost forgiving. Sometimes nature reminds us that every storm eventually ends, but only if we stop creating new ones. Over the following week Serena began changing in ways words alone could never prove. She started coming home earlier without announcing it. She cooked meals even when they weren't perfect. She apologized to people she had neglected, including old friends and family members. Most importantly, she stopped expecting appreciation for every small effort. She finally understood that genuine kindness is not a performance. It is a habit. I didn't instantly trust those changes. Healing doesn't happen because someone says sorry once. Broken confidence grows back slowly, one consistent action at a time. Some evenings I still wondered whether this transformation would last. Other evenings I caught myself smiling because the woman sitting across from me resembled the young dreamer I had fallen in love with years ago. One crisp autumn afternoon we returned to the little park where we had shared our very first picnic before getting married. Children laughed beneath colorful trees while elderly couples walked hand in hand. We found the same old wooden bench, now weathered but still standing. Looking at it, I realized relationships resemble that bench. Rain, sunlight, and passing years leave marks on everything. What matters is whether the foundation remains strong enough to hold two people willing to sit together again. That evening, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the trees, I finally understood the lesson hidden inside the painful words that had nearly ended our marriage. Gratitude cannot be demanded. Respect cannot be forced. Love cannot survive where one heart keeps giving while the other only receives. But when humility replaces pride, and actions replace empty promises, even deeply wounded relationships can sometimes find a new beginning. If this story has touched your heart so far, please pause for a moment and write the word hope in the comments below. Your single word might encourage someone reading through the comments who feels completely alone today. Months later our home no longer felt like a place where two strangers simply shared the same address. Laughter returned gradually. Small conversations became longer ones. We celebrated ordinary evenings without needing expensive restaurants or perfect vacations. We learned that the richest homes are built with patience, forgiveness, and mutual respect rather than impressive furniture or beautiful decorations. Looking back, I no longer remember that painful afternoon as the day everything ended. Instead, I remember it as the day illusion ended and truth finally began. My wife's careless words forced both of us to confront what we had become. My quiet response was never about revenge. It was about remembering that self-respect is not selfish. Sometimes loving another person begins by refusing to lose yourself completely. As the warm daylight faded into a peaceful evening, we stood together watering the flowers outside our home. Many of the plants had nearly died during months of neglect, yet with steady care they had bloomed again in brilliant colors. Watching them sway gently in the breeze, I smiled because they reminded me of us. Not perfect. Not untouched by hardship. Simply alive because someone finally chose to care. If this story moved you, reminded you of someone you love, or encouraged you never to take another person's kindness for granted, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Whispering Stories. Your support allows these meaningful stories to reach hearts that may desperately need hope today. And always remember this, the greatest victories in life are rarely won through anger or revenge. They are won through dignity, compassion, and the quiet courage to become the kind of person you can be proud of when the day finally comes to an end.